I'm ready.
All right, we're good.
My name's Gary Cox. My wife and I live here, Josephine Commons, in Lafayette. I am 84 and a third, and my wife is 83, and we've been married 64 years. But we were talking a little earlier, Mace, about changes and keeping a mind of your own, because I think in the 84 years that I've lived, it's very hard. It's not easy to maintain your own thoughts. The reasoning that you come to from your experiences, we all think through our own experiences, why we're all different and we're all special, really. So we all have different experiences. No one is raised in a test tube. We've all gone through different things, so it forms our opinions. Whether we like it or not, everything that we experience gets filtered through our previous experiences.
Sure.
And I quit high school as a freshman. And I'm not sure why. I've thought about it often. Part of it was I come from a country school. It was a long way in town to go to high school. And I didn't know anyone. I felt uncomfortable. And I was put in a special class where it was a class for people who had high IQs. And that were supposed to become geniuses or something, I don't know. I mean, it was an experiment. And my wife and I both got put into that class. We both left. I left high school altogether. I just got tired of it. I found for the first time after leaving grade school that there were people that were smarter than I was in that class. There were some real smart people, so I felt I'm no longer the star. And that was part of why I left, I know that. But it was also much bigger, and you had to follow the bells, and I started feeling like Pavlov's dog, being trained, not educated, but trained to be a better citizen, to listen to the bells and answer the bells, and if you didn't make it to class in time, you had to get a tardy slip. And so I just felt lots of things, and I quit. But Carol left a special class for the same reason I did, but she was smarter. She stayed in school. I joined the Army. I felt there was too much regimentation in high school, so I joined the Army.
How'd that work out for you?
I passed that test. But Carol would write to me simply because she was a neighbor. We weren't in love at that time, but we had known each other for quite a while. And she wrote to me, and I'd be sitting in a trench at 40 below with people shooting at me. And she's telling me she went to the prom with the guy I never did like. And I thought, poor decision, my friend, bad decision. So it taught me very early in life to be very careful of what I agreed to. To be a little more cautious. I went to Korea thinking my government would never manipulate me. They were above that. Everyone who worked for the FBI was a hero. Everyone, you know, we've all gone through that feeling. And I found out in Korea, I wasn't fighting for freedom. Syngman Rhee was the dictator in South Korea, and I'm fighting for this guy. I didn't volunteer for that. He murders his opponents. He doesn't get elected. And so I left Korea with a lot of questions, in other words. And I got home, and I had been raised in a racist community, very white, working class, never had any associations with black people. I hadn't gone to school with them, hadn't played football with them, they just weren't in my life. I knew that they lived in South Peoria, but never had any relationships
The schools
with them.
were separated back then, right?
Pardon me?
The schools were still separated.
Separated, very separated. If you lived in one area, you went to that school, and if you lived in another, you went to, yes, there was no blacks allowed. It was very segregated at that time. And so was the Army, I found out. Had been segregated clear up to 1952. I'm not sure this was the first integration, but with the unit I was in, in the 9th Infantry Regiment in the 2nd Division had just recently been integrated. And so I was in a unit where they were just first put together. And so when I got up on the front line, I have black people and South Korean people that I'm supposed to depend on for my life. They're next to me, and I've been taught that they're inferior people, and they run. But I found when you spend a lot of time protecting one another's backs, and you spend a lot of time, it's not shooting and fighting, it's talking. And especially at night, we fought at night in Korea a lot. It was a change in combat tactics. That's when the Chinese chose to fight. It was in the evening, and we talked a lot. And I forget that the guy next to me was black, and we talk about home and jobs, and so I began to understand that, you know, you've got to meet people and talk to them before you make any kind of decisions on whether you want to be friends. Get to know them, because you can miss some really, really good friends who are a different color than you are, go to a different church, think differently. They're wonderful friends that will protect your back when it's necessary. So I come home with much more accepting of others and less judgmental. And I was only 18. And I went home to a very racist, very segregated community who didn't accept my new thoughts about race, etc. They found it frightening a little bit, I think, fearful, that I would accept blacks as equals. And in fact, some places, they could outdo me. And I think a lot of times, and I had a black man tell me this once. I was in a demonstration with him. We were in a demonstration to open up the schools, to integrate the schools. And he said, you know, I can understand a working man's racism, because we're head to head for jobs, for security, and I think he said to me, I think working people are afraid we may be equals. And I might get his job because I am equal, or maybe even better at what he's at. So I understand his fear of people of a different color, of a different, taking his work, the thing he's proud of, the thing he wants to support his family with. But I don't understand the intellectuals' racism, because they really do feel superior. And that's the thing I can't get over. They don't call me nigger because they don't have to. They don't have to be afraid of me taking their job.
Right.
You know, they are in a different society, one I can never approach. And so that's the one I have a hard time dealing with. And you know, I thought about that for a long time in my life, about what he said. And there's something to it. Not necessarily the answer, but it made me think about it differently. And all of my 84 and a half years, that's just what I've found. That if we really listen to other people and their thoughts and their ideas, and we try to put them all together, we may come closer to the truth. That's the beauty of democracy. I've become less judgmental. I don't know how to judge good and bad really anymore. All I know is what I feel comfortable with. I don't know if that's good or bad. Just because I'm comfortable and I'm not afraid of it, it doesn't make it good or bad. I just don't know how to judge it. I'll leave that up to the gods to judge and decide that later, because I don't have the mental capacity. And so I have a lot less faith in my own thoughts and listen more carefully to others to help me along. But it's very important to hang on to yourself and to think for yourself and sort those ideas out and accept the ones that fit and feel comfortable for you. Doesn't make it right or wrong, but allow other people's thoughts to enter and sort them out, and if they fit comfortably, put them on. Start wearing them. until someone else comes along and has logical thoughts that make more sense, and accept that. But be very careful, because everyone wants you to think like they do. It's just human nature. It's human nature to feel more comfortable if you can talk the guy into believing everything you believe. But then he's no fun anymore. There's no excitement in the conversation. You have to, you know, it's. Anyway, I came home from Korea, and I had believed very strongly in the Second World War. And my neighbors almost were all heroes to me. I was young, and they come home and with their stories and their uniforms and the movies that we saw as young people, all of the wonderful heroic movies about war. I thought, this is really something that we are right. We're a country. We weren't afraid of anything. We had overcome the Second World War by working together, and the future looked brighter, always brighter. The cars were going to be better. We felt very comfortable with all of this, with very positive attitudes about the future, about ourselves, that we could do almost anything we wanted. But I found also there was another side of war, by being in Korea and actually killing other people. Because I thought it was right. Someone had told me it was right. Someone had told me that those people were bad. And I started thinking, but they're just working folks like myself who've been told that I am no good. And we're shooting at each other. And maybe there's a better way to get along. Maybe all wars aren't necessary. I think the Second World War still, after all these years, I still believe it was a necessary thing for us to do. And to step up and be a part of that and take those chances was a very heroic thing to do. But I don't think just because that one was, that all wars are necessary anymore. And I come home with two very different thoughts from the community that I had grown up in. And one was, question war. Question it is, are you being used? Are you being used by someone who says, I want your oil, but I'm not sending my boys to get it, I'm going to send yours? Are you being used? Think for yourself. Use your own head, and if it feels right to you, go. But if it don't, I don't blame the people for not going. And I was taught that. It took me a while to reach that point. I was very much against the war protesters in Vietnam at first. And a young man who I worked with, a very bright young man who I listened to and I liked a lot, said, Gary, there's a lot you don't know. Would you read a book? So he gave me a book. I forget the name of the book, but it told me a little bit about the history of the Korean people and how they had been abused and what they were fighting about. And it gave me, we began to talk about it, and I began to understand there's a lot that I did not know. And as little as I did know, I didn't have the right to send young men to their deaths, because I began to question, is this a right thing to do? Are we in Vietnam for the right reasons? At first I thought, well, of course, if our government said it was right, it must be. But then after I started reading and thinking about it for myself and listening to young people who were opposed to that war, I thought, you know, I don't know enough. I've got to find out more. And the more I found out, the more I felt like we stepped in something that we shouldn't have. We don't have the right to tell other people how to live. We don't let people do that for us. Why should they allow us to do it for them?
Right.
And so I became anti-Vietnam War. And it scares me because these are human beings. I know the rulers, the people in power are angry with each other and won't talk to each other. And I say, put them in the field and let them duke it out and leave us out of it until they come to some conclusions. But I just don't I'm worried about a whole lot of innocent young people being killed, and I'm worried about all the money that's going to go to waste that could be used for better things. And I know that's just my point of view, and there are others that I need to listen to, and I will cautiously sort it out, but I am right now at this moment worried about it very much, and I just don't think the United States is always right and can tell other people how to live and what they should believe in. Why don't we just stay home? Stay home, pay attention to your own business. So, and it's, what I'm saying, and the point I'm trying to make here, Mace, is that when you have an idea that's different than the majority, you had better be ready to suffer the consequences, because it scares people and they're going to try to change you one way or another to believe like they do because they're afraid. But it's not easy. When I went home from Korea with a different attitude towards blacks and a different attitude towards war, it was no longer maybe the heroic thing to do. Every time we're asked, sometimes we should think it through and refuse. Like Muhammad Ali said, no Vietnamese ever called me a nigger. Why should I go over there? He had a point.
Yeah.
He had a good point. But what I found was, like him, he suffered for what he thought. He suffered greatly for what he thought. His championship rings were taken from him because of it. It's hard sometimes when you're in a minority to hang on to your thinking, but if you don't, you're not a person. I believe strongly you should use your brain, think it through. It doesn't make you right, it makes you a human being. It doesn't make you right, but it makes you human. That's what I think. And if you don't, if you're just one of the crowd, and you say, yes, it must be right, and you don't know why you think that way, I haven't got much that I can learn from you.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mace, that's all I wanted to point out, is that to have another opinion sometimes is not easy. I say to people, use your mind, use your own head, but then I don't tell them sometimes that's pretty tough to do. You might lose some friends because they no longer agree with you.
I think you nailed it on the head.
All right?
All right.